The page from the comic Mouse deals with a dialogue between two mice, a father and a son. The father tells his son about his arrival at Auschwitz during Second World War. He recounts how the cats kind of took the mice papers, clothes and hair, and that all the mice were very frightened and confused about what would happen to them. The comic is a survivor's tale, which causes that the comic is told with a first-person narrator. And this means that the comic is subjective and told from within. The comic page is in a way split up in two by a white gutter in the middle, which I've made a circle around. And the gutter kind of separates the present part of the comic, the dialogue between the two mice, and the flashback part where the father is telling about his time in Auschwitz. And this separation causes two primary narratives, the one at Auschwitz and the one in the present time. At the flashback part of the comic page, many of the speech bubbles are breaking the gutter, and this kind of becomes a tool to connect the two parts of the comic, so the reader gets the impression that the dialogue between the two mice refers to the flashback to his time at Auschwitz. In third tier's second panel, the bottom speech bubble is also breaking the gutter like the ones in the flashback part of the comic, but this exact speech bubble is jagged, which kind of underlines the frightening message and the frightening message written in the speech bubble. Because during Second World War, the Nazis gassed the Jews in gas chambers by telling them that they were going to take a shower. So the message in the comic is a clear reference to this method of killing Jews, and therefore the speech bubble is breaking the gutter to underline the fear and the wickedness it represents. There are two relationships between the mice which is worth talking about. The first one is the relationship between the father and his earlier wife Anya. He tells his son that the war may have brought them apart, but that she will always be in his heart. First, when he tells about his new wife Marla, we find out that Anya probably died in the war since they are no longer together. So it becomes clear that the new relationship with Marla is nothing like the one he had with Anya. When the father mouse talks about Marla, his face impression becomes angry and bitter, and the only thing he says about her is that she grabs his money. So by telling about his wives, it becomes clear where his heart belongs, and that Anya was his one and only love. The other relationship is the one between the father mouse and the son. It becomes clear to the reader that it's a father and a son through the word pop, which is another word for father. And the son seems very interested in the father's past when he asks him to tell about his time in Auschwitz. And the father seems glad that he asked. And this may mean that the father and the son doesn't really know each other that well, since the father has to tell his son about his time in Auschwitz, even though it's a huge part of his history and life. But it isn't just a question of how these memories is passed from generation to another, but it's also the question about whether it can be hard to understand what others has lived through when you yourself haven't lived through it. So the comic wrestles with the issue of whether it is possible to truly understand the Holocaust when you haven't lived through it. As in a comic, most of the language is dialogue, with the images doing the work of setting the scene and representing the action. The dialogue between the two mice is stamped by the father mouse broken English. For example, when he says, "Not so like Marla, what grabs out my money." The father mouse has probably fled from Poland to start a new life in the US, because many Jews fled to the US after the Second World War, so it is kind of imaginable that the father mouse in the comic has done the same. The language in the comic is also marked by a couple of German words, for example, schnell. Um, and this use of German words just underlines the reference to the Germans' behavior during Second World War. In the comic Mouse, the Jews are portrayed as mice, while Germans are portrayed as cats. And this metaphor of Jews as mice is taken directly from Nazi propaganda, which portrayed the Jews as a kind of vermin to be exterminated. And this cat-mouse relationship is also an apt metaphor for the relationship between the Nazis and Jews, because the Nazis kind of toyed with the Jews before, ultimately killing them. There are also some people or roles portrayed as pigs in the comic, um, and these pigs are the Jews which agreed in doing the dirty work for the Nazis for their own life in return. So they saved their own life at expense of their Jewish brothers and sisters, and therefore they are mirrored as the dirty animal, the pig. And this decision to portray different races and different kind of animals may seem a bit oversimplistic and only for promoting ethnic stereotypes, but beneath the simple metaphor, however, is an earnest attempt to illustrate the unyielding stratification by class and race, which was very much a part of the life during Second World War. The way of drawing also inhales a message about this class and race system. The mice are drawn in a way so you, as viewer, can't really see the difference between each individual. Um, and this is the same way the Nazis saw the Jews during Second World War, because they also tar the Jews with the same brush, which is the same way the cats see the mice in the comic.